So the transplanters had a very small meeting. We were very jealous of the very large group over here that was laughing and having lots of fun. But what we did, we're actually very proud of ourselves. We actually put together an outline to sort of summarize the major themes that came out of this. And actually what we're thinking, instead of a proceedings paper, is actually to draft a white paper just to sort of summarize the gaps related to the thought about transplant in the area of SJIA with significant manifestations. And so we're thinking that that white paper would include very high level things. We would not touch on anything related to like conditioning regimen recommendations and things like this. This is not possible at this time, but just addressing the gaps in who should be transplanted. We don't know. Studies are needed. What are things that, if you are thinking about transplant, should be evaluated before heading into transplant? What things should be monitored after transplant? The need for multidisciplinary care teams to follow these patients before and after transplant, including the parent's voice in decision-making, including multiple stakeholders in those very individualized patient care decisions. And so that's the very short story. So we hope to put that together, actually. And then everyone can input on it. Happy to take questions. I know, Randy, you have questions or comment about it. No? Okay.
From a patient perspective, that sounds great, actually. Are there any particular aspects that parents think we should make? I was just going to go ask the parents, are there any particular aspects that you would want to make sure to include there in such a document? I think this would be really good and needed from a parent's perspective. So just make it language that we can understand. But sounds great, actually. You have something?
No, it's just
okay.
No,
I think sounds great.
All right. Well, we look forward to working with everyone.
Okay. Nicole?
Hello, my name is Nicole Jinier. I am a mother of a daughter, a 14-year-old with SJIA, and our group talked about 504 and IEP planning for individuals with SJIA, and we focused on identifying what the barriers are to education for our kiddos and identifying accommodations that can help them in the public and private school setting. So our goal is to create a pamphlet or a guide to help parents come up with accommodations based on their children's needs. Yeah. Any questions? Thank you.
This is much needed, by the way. And parents often discuss in the group that they need some help, and they go to other foundations, etc., where there's a lot of information for JIA. But SJIA now, with its all these different manifestations, it's got a lot of like needs and questions, which so I hope we put together something that can help parents. The next person was Luciana, who's going to give an update about our discussions about how the SJIA Foundation can extend its work in Europe with the help of all the European parents here who are here and the doctors. And if you have any ideas here that we weren't discussed yesterday, please do speak up.
We talked about being involved, especially in press, and also with the working party that Claudia is here, and it's going to help. She will send a newsletter about the foundation, the work that the foundation is doing to all press members, and also to ask for a presentation in press, an official presentation in press for us. We also talked about tools for the patients. They need to know that Facebook has a translation tool. So you can write in your own language, and then it will translate to English. So you will read in English or in Portuguese or in whatever language you are in. We need to do the follow-up with the EMA people who were listening to our sessions here yesterday, and also we will try to see the Euler. That is an organization that you have a lot of other foundations below, because then you can be connected with Aurora-Ds as well. I think that this is the name.
Yeah.
Because it's the Rare Diseases Foundations, and yeah, so then you're trying to do all that, and I think, yeah, and then also get a little bit better, like in advertising the foundation there through the parents, through the doctors, through everyone. Any questions?
Or ideas.
Yeah. No? Okay.
Because we really need the community's help in Europe, and I feel like with working with so many of the doctors from Europe, we do understand the context there and the needs there, and now we have a bunch of European parents who can help us be represented there. So I always feel like it's really important to be able to represent, truly represent, and I don't think I truly represent the European context, but the parents from Europe do, and we can, it would be really nice if when the patient voice was included, they asked us so that we could help them find the right parents. So if any of you can help with that, we'd appreciate it. Vince has a question.
Just a comment, Rashmi. One of the good ways people to engage are the site coordinators. They're really super helpful with that. It's not just the providers, but the coordinators and the nurses are people that can say, here's some resources and you should contact these guys.
Sure. Where's the cards? Can you show me the, yeah. So once again, this is our, we are not very good at doing this, but we did get these cards made, which have a QR code leading to patient resources for the foundation and for the foundation registry. So if we have a lot of these that you can grab on your way out, and you can, if you can hand these to any parents who are looking for information, that would be, of connecting with other parents, that would be really great. And this was something I had heard requested, so we made these.
So I think this will be sent to the MAS, SJIA Press Working Party, so they can, I mean, this is PDF, right?
Yeah, PDF.
So that's easy to be sent. Second thing, I think there was one thing we said yesterday, Luciana. I can't see Luciana. She must be somewhere behind the column. Contacting the national societies for pediatric rheumatology to be put in touch with the patient association in each European countries. This is something that is, I think we discussed it yesterday, is missing on the list. This is not very difficult to do because.
We are happy to do it. We are part of ENCA too. We try to be
Yeah.
involved everywhere.
Yeah, but ENCA is not necessarily linked very nicely to all patient association in the national, with the national patient association.
Okay, so you're saying.
I would use both ways.
Got it.
The more the better. Okay.
Got it. Okay, understood.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's just, are you also connect, like there's a link from other patient organizations? I know from Auto-Inflammatory Alliance, there's a link to SJIA organization.
Yeah,
So like, I just want to make sure like that too, or other, rare diseases. I think that would be something.
Yeah, we do work with the Auto-Inflammatory Alliance, and I can make sure that they link to us. I think in general, when they see any patients who need help, they do reach out. We mutually refer patients all the time.
But how about other one, like Blau or Canadian?
Not so,
like, because,
not so much. Maybe we could do a better job there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to add, ERA and RITA, so the European Reference Centers Network, might also be an opportunity as they are developing patient journeys and these kind of things. So,
Okay. Yeah.
so I'll
Yeah.
link.
Can you
absolutely.
connect us? And yeah. And there was a half an idea of maybe doing something like a half day something before the press conference or the EULAR conference, and in the same location. If as long as people are willing to help with the organization, we are up for thinking about that. Okay. Next was Accelerate. Grant's going to tell us, everyone, a little bit about Accelerate and give an update, and then the registry group, and then wrap up, which Fabrizio and Grant are doing.
Thanks. Rashmi first asked me just to give a quick overview of what the Accelerate project is. So Accelerate, which stands for Accelerating Therapies for Refractory Systemic JIA, which I guess we could rebrand difficult to treat, but you know, we said refractory, is a project that is funded by the SJIA Foundation through their support from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to build sort of this patient-powered research project to understand what is refractory systemic JIA, what are these phenotypes biologically, and what are the best ways to be treating it. This is a network of, I believe, about 10 sites and large children's hospitals. So Cincinnati as the coordinating center, Boston Children's, CHOP, HSS, Alabama, Minnesota, and then we're adding UCSF and hopefully Seattle. And am I forgetting somebody? What's that? Houston. God damn it. Sorry, Tiffany. Houston, Texas Children's Hospital. Everything's bigger in Texas. So we have to date enrolled 28 children with systemic GIA, most of them with refractory disease courses, including lung disease, chronic recurrent MAS, liver dysfunction, and then following them, getting detailed clinical information as well as high-quality biosamples over time. And we're now in the point of starting to think about what are some of the initial studies that we want to be performing to get a feeling for what are these patients sort of immunologically, and then being able to ask some more really focused, detailed questions on smaller subsets of these patients, because they really let us ask some of these sort of N of one questions. You know, you have a patient with lung disease and they start on a JAK inhibitor, and how does that change their T cell compartment, their cytokine environment? And you have several patients with those phenotypes, and you can ask those types of questions. So, I think we're thinking about some relatively inexpensive things that we can send on everybody, and then thinking about what are the more focused questions. And then as far as sustainability, thinking about how do we want to sort of continue with ongoing enrollment, but then how can we, through funding through NIH, through industry, through other mechanisms, being able to do larger and, of course, more expensive studies with this work, and with a goal of this being really an inclusive thing across our community. Again, we've added people like Mike Umbrello, who's not enrolling patients, but is part of this collaboration, and is going to be working on genetic analysis with this, because we want this to be a resource for everybody to be able to feed into their own things that they're interested in. Like my own work in lung disease, people like Susan Caney and her interest in monocytes and MAS, for examples, that this can really power the work of multiple different investigators in a collaborative way. So that's kind of a broad overview. Questions?
How much clinical information you're collecting from the patients, like the PROs and so on, also being collected?
So we are getting several PROs. We're getting a PEDS-QL, getting some other sort of clinical outcome measures, information on medications used currently as well as in the past, as well as labs. I think we're finding, as we kind of now are looking at this, there's maybe some things that we need to make an amendment and go back and collect. But I think we always knew that would be the case. As we wrote the protocols in ways that we can, we have a central IRB, so we can put that through and then just update the sites and get that additional information. So we were talking that the startup costs of this in both money but also time and emotional energy have been high. But I think ultimately they're going to pay off, because we've built this central IRB, making changes is a lot easier, and then being able to say, well, let's collect more patients. Well, now we've got this whole, it's like Kara, we've got this whole regulatory network in place now. We've already paid for that, and now we can build off of that much more easily. Cool, thanks.
With that, on to the registry, natural history, who is giving an update about that?
Okay, so we had yesterday and today very productive discussion, mainly on two levels of efforts. The first effort is collecting what we currently do with difficult to treat patients. So what we are doing in clinical practice, and that will be the metaphor survey that will be out in a few weeks and will circulate it to into the press network and can be forwarded also to CARA members. And then there is the Systemic GIA Foundation Registry on data, what patients have currently done, the CARA Registry on lung disease. The other main effort was the Natural History Retrospective Registry, with the aim to obtain some high quality data to be used as control group for clinical trial and registration purposes. So this could be applied for all still disease patients, but of course the urgent need is for difficult to treat refractory patients. So that's the main effort. The first step is to achieve a consensus of what we consider refractory, difficult to treat patients. We already have the preliminary definition of refractory that probably need to be finalized, in particular for liver involvement, smoldering MIS, with or without lung disease. Then the first step is the identification of a core set of essential data that we need to collect, and we need to collect firstly retrospectively, and of course include clinical laboratory data, outcome measures and outcome data, timing for outcome measure, and a certain granularity on treatment, especially for glucocorticoids usage, including glucocorticoids to 60 and adverse event. So we can move identifying the major stakeholders involved with major registry, including scientific societies, press, CARA, including main countries, US, Europe, Japan, China, and of course trying to collaborate with the Accelerate projects. What we can look at clinical trials, in which of course main efforts have already been done to capture the main items and outcome measure, main registries, prospective cohorts that we already have, and observational cohorts that the real HLH, for example. So the second step is how to make all these data accessible, but that's a big deal. I don't want to get in. So I will stop at the first step. Okay? Questions? Rashmi?
How will we predefine what to look for? Don't we want to first look at understand where the medical records are? Because you talked about a lot of countries, and I worry the medical records will be so different that we need to identify at least some countries where we can get similar medical records, and there's something, and then do some preliminary project to understand what kind of data is extractable, and then come back and define based on the data. Like it has to be an interactive process with the data. I feel like there's a lot of front end there that I'm not a scientist in this field, so maybe that's the way it needs to be done. But also like the FDA indicated that they would want us to talk to them on a pretty early level. So we want to have some kind of a proposal and structure for working with them, and then go back to them. And also, maybe it's not in the context of one trial, but we really need to think with the clinical trial people with their trial hat on. Yes, Mariana, but.
That's one of the steps that we are already doing. Like we're doing a systematic review of looking at all the published studies in SJIA and adult Still's disease in different countries, and seeing what kind of data each study collected to see what is already being done and what is already available. And that was the first step. But then the discussion is like, what are the things that are not currently being collected that would need to be added in the future, for like looking at retrospectively or prospectively, but we're already looking at what is already being done. That's the one thing that we already have underway.
So Mariana, but I think the SLR would be too long. So I think we cannot start from scratch. I think we have a good knowledge of what refractory systemic JIA is and what are the variables. We just need to make sure that we are capturing in this registry what is needed, and we already have clinical trials to start from. So I think we should start from the clinical trial and from the people who are collecting data on systemic JIA. They have a data collection form. We can use those and try to adapt it to what we want. This is, where is Rashmi? Here. This is where to start from, okay? Then getting into this, the clinical record, the electronic medical record, this is something that will come later, okay? Because I think what we need to collect is a minimal data set of basic data that will inform us on disease activity, therapeutic burden, and side effects of treatment. That's all we need for the natural history study. Then there is another level, which is the prospective thing. That's a completely different ballgame, and that's completely different to me, okay? But I think the urgency is on the natural registry, retrospective.
Fabrizio, I have a question about that because I think isn't there some criteria for what should be included in natural history? I was wondering if some of this existing may be missing some. So I just
there is an FDA guidance document for natural the registry study, and there is an EMEA guidance document. So there are information how to build it. And that's one thing, how to build it, okay? But the real thing is that we need to come together and agree on what are the data that define the natural history of refractory SJIA. Okay, and there is nothing published except that we collect data for systemic JIA. But so on refractory, there is very little, I would say. Yeah. So we just need to agree.
You know, I have a business background too, so I start thinking about how to work on a structural level with this. And I read up about what the FDA was recommending. What Nicole was recommending was these public-private partnerships. And in the public-private partnerships, the necessary components are that you need 501(c)(3) foundation, which we are. So we can play that role, and you need at least one private partnership with a company. And I think our interest would be best served by having multiple. So I think, and so there's the scientific angle of how we do the data, but also the structure in which we work. So if there was a project to be initiated like this with the foundation and the researchers as partners, and then bring in the private. I can ask the FDA, they said there might be other structures of working with them too, but their point was if you make that public-private partnership like it's being done in lupus, then you can involve them formally in a very early process for reviewing what you do.
Them is the FDA.
FDA, yeah, them is the FDA. So
private companies is necessary
yes,
Sorry. Private companies necessarily pharma companies, or can be any other company? Assume there is an AI company, or, you know, somebody that is interested in data collection.
Maybe somebody can look up this. This was very easy to find. It was just like the public-private. I just searched for it last night and tried to read up. But it might, maybe it can be any.
sponsor.
Yeah. Maybe it's a sponsor. Yeah. Oh, it's a sponsor. So maybe it will be, you know, somebody who's building these type of natural history registries, which we can use. I don't know what the, but that seems to be the fundamental structure that we can work under and then go back to them for a meeting with these kind of the data stuff in the background, which we can present then. Okay, with that, I am going to hand it over to Fabrizio and Grant for conference wrap-up, follow-ups, and then, yeah, we are nearly there. Long.
I think we agreed you go first, right? This is the only thing we agreed upon, who goes first. Anything else is going to be probably different and controversial.
Excellent. Well, I first wanted to say thank you to really all of the families that traveled from all over the world to be here with us, and particularly Rashmi for helping make sure they could be here and for organizing this. I know for all of us, it's incredibly inspiring, but it's also kind of what fuels what we do, to hear your stories and to know how much what we've done has been helpful, but also how much more we still have to do. And you know, that for us is really why we're all here. And so thank you first off to all of you guys for coming. So just thinking about kind of a couple of sort of overall kind of themes and maybe sort of next steps that can come out of this. You know, something that I think we talked a lot about was trying to harmonize things. One of the things I learned actually from a surgeon when I was a resident is that it's less important to do it right than it is to do it the same. Because then you can be a scientist and figure out what works and what doesn't. But when we're all doing different things all over the country and all over the world, it makes it really hard to figure out what's working and what's not working. And this is on multiple different levels, you know, the kinds of data we collect, the kinds of composite outcome measures we're doing, how we want to be screening for lung disease, having consensus treatment plans for how we want to then deal with management of lung disease and what medicines we stop and which medicines we start. We don't have to be right the first time, but if we do this in a collaborative way, and we can then figure out what's working and what isn't in a sort of an iterative way. And so I've sort of heard threads of that in various different discussions and all over places, and starting with, you know, can we, you know, this white paper that our BMT colleagues talked about, thinking, can we come up with sort of guidelines that are not just Boston thinking about how they're going to do it, and me and Alexi and Chris thinking about how we want to do it, but all of us, including with, you know, a stamp from our organization, like, you know, things like CARA, other foundation, even ACR, to say, like, this is our recommendations for how we should be screening for lung disease. I think those are really important next steps that can come out of this. And then thinking about how we can make these prospective studies in ways that will actually allow us to have data to show that medicines that we're using are working or are not working. So I don't know if I have anything more insightful or thoughtful than that, so I'm going to turn it over to Fabrizio.
Thank you, Grant. I cheated. I took notes. I made a couple of slides. So there is a little bit of a list, if I may have the slides. First of all, I think this is always a great meeting. It's always better and better and better, I can say. And it's getting also a little larger and larger and larger. Yeah, I know. I know. It's because you push us and you push, and you know, there are many families here. It's great to see people from Europe, even with a UK accent. And so I think we're really going the proper way, okay? And I really like it, enjoy it. This is something I'm going to miss. So in not a particular order, this is more of a to-do list or to-think list for me, and therefore I share it with you. I think we talked a lot of IL-18. We all agree it's potentially important. We need, you know, Dr. Shimizu made the point with his data, but we all have data sitting in our labs or sitting in our clinical records. We need to harmonize tests and have, you know, develop diagnostic cutoff. This will be the less difficult thing to do. Then IL-18 can be useful in other ways. I really lump together everything on refractory, the adult perspective, the international perspective with different availabilities and different use of drugs. I think we need to think about those. The most important thing for me was to listen to the patient journeys and the patient stories, because that's exactly where the unmet need is. And I think there are four main things that I take home: is the disease activity, the acute unpredictable sudden flares, glucocorticoids, and side effects from glucocorticoids, but not only from glucocorticoids. I really like the real-life data. I think they add to our knowledge. I just point your attention to the fact that 6 out of 10 patients were in ICU in the real HLH data that Ed Barron showed us. And mortality was, I hate to say only, but with 6 patients in ICU, that's only 1 out of 10. In the trials, there were only, I think, 5, but I may be wrong, patients in ICU out of almost 40 patients. So that's really a different set of patients with very severe disease. 3 algorithms for screening and monitor, reconcile, that Grant said it. I think I went back, I did something on KL6 ages ago. I think it's worth looking back into that, and thank you for pointing out KL6. Well, I liked, because of my personal attitude, the clinical trial section, obviously, and the debate. I think the only one trial that we heard from the FDA was pretty clear. This is a rare setting, and therefore it's only one shot, and we better get it right. We keep hearing reasonable evidence of clinical efficacy. They want to have clinical efficacy. But still, I think we can work all together about the proper response criteria, which has to include clinical benefit, but therapeutic burden and glucocorticoid dose is something we have certainly to discuss. BMT was already discussed and nicely presented. I might have not been listening. Where are the transplanters? Can't see them. Here they are, sitting there. Sorry, Rebecca. My take-home message was early discussion with families. And I can't remember whether you said it in your wrap-up of the group, but I think this is very important. At least this is a take-home message that I really am going to take home. DRB 115, still need to understand the role of this association, but there are various hypotheses to be tested, I think, and this is great because we have something to work on. I think this is important. I take your point. There is confusion. Miles' dad said that. There is, yes, I think this is our responsibility. We have to develop a way to communicate the absence of information without confusing the families. And we have to admit that we just simply don't know. And we are proposing choices based on our best, possible opinion, but it's our opinion. And we have to make sure that we don't make confusion. Therefore, communication by the treating physician is crucial. And, I was impressed by the heterogeneity of our approach to new onset patients, but I'm even more impressed by our heterogeneity. We do all different things. We do methotrexate, we do cyclosporin, we do mTOR, we do JAK. We do everything in a new onset patient without really knowing what we are doing. I think it's about, and that's what the discussion about the current treatment plans and trying to harmonize what we do prospectively. I think this is important. Weaning is very important. We have preliminary data on biomarker guided. I think there are two ways of doing it, early and late. BAS would be early weaning. I would be more conservative. We tend to do late weaning. I think some of us are more aggressive in weaning. Some of us are more conservatives. Again, it has to be addressed because this is an important thing. That's it. So I'm not supposed to close the meeting, Rashmi.
I was going to ask anyone if they have any
Yes,
thoughts, comments.
exactly.
Anyone here?
I think I put on my...
The DRB1 thing is the elephant in the room, as was mentioned earlier, and your point is right. No one knows, but I think there are people who spout that they know, and I think that's part of the confusion.
It's political, but our personal attitude towards our own data or somebody else's data, it's always a personal attitude. I just feel that we should convey the fact that we don't know.
100%, but that's
The
not.
fact that we don't know, and we make decision based on our best possible, opinion and data. And we have to convey these options as options and not as something that is, carved in stones, because none of the thing we do in certain situations is carved in stones. Randy. Is that strong enough? Nope.
It's just you're preaching to the choir.
Any other comments, thoughts before we wrap up from anyone?
I'll say, as a parent, it's been really energizing to be in the room with everybody and see you guys pushing each other, challenging each other, trying to come up with solutions for the kids that, sometimes you, as a parent, you feel like, what's next? There's no more. And seeing you guys all in the room pushing for that makes me really appreciate everything that you do for them. So thank you. And thank you for inviting us to be at the conference too.
Anyone else with any last minute thoughts before we end? Because I don't really have much to to this.
Okay, I guess that's the 5th NextGen meeting. 2016, I remember I read about this format of conference, and the idea was that the only way to involve the FDA was to go to DC. So, I said, okay, I'll go. I guess we'll organize it in DC. And somehow people came, even the FDA, many of the same people. And now we've done it 5 times. And, I took some time off after my son's BMT, but then felt like this has become my life's calling at this point. So I think it's just as me. I think there's several parents here, Luciana, Leah, Vince, I think so many of us, Natasha, who feel like we can do something meaningful here. We are not doctors. Though if I had to go back and live my life, I'd probably try to become one. You should hear me telling my sons, how about biology? How about chemistry? But no, I really appreciate the community, and they are able to gather together to push this. And things have changed so much from when we got here for the first time, where this lung disease was like a completely new thing, and people were just grappling with it. So thank you for coming on this journey. Yes, and hopefully in 2 years, or maybe something sooner in Europe.
One thing, Rashmi, along those lines, like we're not doctors, but this is kind of our life's calling. I keep trying to push you guys, like, to let us know what is your barriers, what you need to push it over the finish line, right? So is it more samples? Is it trios? Is it more resources? Is it whatever those things that are stumbling blocks? That's where I feel like somebody like me or Rashmi or any of the other parents can maybe step in and try to help you, right? Because we can't go back to school and solve it ourselves, right? We can't become the doctors, but we can definitely try to help you overcome the barriers that you're feeling right now, which is we don't know what those barriers are.
I guess we are done. I guess everybody, or some of you onwards to ACR, and that's another advisory board meeting. And thank you so much for making it all the way.